How the world was divided before race was created. The Descendants of Shem. Okay, so you should be coming from part 4 of the series. These videos are a part of a docu-series and should be watched from the beginning in order if you're going to understand what is being presented. So please, if you have not watched parts 1 through 4, please stop this video and start back from video 1 and watch them consecutively for true context. Okay, well, like I have been saying through parts 1 through 4, we are not black people. But again, this statement still needs a lot more information in order for the point to be validated and to be true. But we are getting close to proving this. In the last part, we went through how the world was divided before race and skin color. In that last discussion, we discussed the other son of Noah, Japheth. Let's continue with this discussion and go over the last son of Noah. We will discuss Shem, who we know as the Semites. Chapter 11 of the book of Genesis goes over the sons of Shem until we get to Abram, who later will be named Abraham. Abraham was not only the father of the Hebrew Israelite nation, but also of the Arab nation. Abraham had 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Genesis chapter 16 verse 1 says, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian and maidservant whose name was Hagar." You see, it was Hagar who bore Abraham's first son, Ishmael. In the book of Jasher, it says, "And Ishmael, the son of Abraham, was grown up in those days. He was 14 years old when Sarah bore Isaac to Abraham. And Elohim was with Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and he grew up, and he learned to use the bow and became an archer. And when Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. And Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him. And he took the bow and drew it and put the arrow in it, and intended to slay Isaac. And Sarah saw the act which Ishmael desired to do to her son Isaac, and aggrieved her exceedingly on account of her son. And she sent for Abraham, and said to him, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for her son shall not be heir with my son. For thus did he seek to do unto him this day. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah, and he rose up early in the morning, and he took 12 loaves and a bottle of water, which he gave to Hagar, and sent her away with her son. And Hagar went with her son to the wilderness, and they dwelt in the wilderness of Paran with the inhabitants of the wilderness. And Ishmael was an archer, and he dwelt in the wilderness a long time. And he and his mother afterward went to the land of Mizraim, and they dwelt there. And Hagar took a woman for her son from Mizraim, and her name was Merivah. And the woman of Ishmael conceived and bore 4 sons and 2 daughters. And Ishmael and his mother and his woman and children afterward went and returned to the wilderness. And they made themselves tents in the wilderness, in which they dwelt. And they continued to travel and then to rest monthly and yearly. And Elohim gave Ishmael flocks and herds and tents on account of Abraham his father, and the man increased in cattle. And Ishmael dwelt in deserts and in tents, traveling and resting for a long time, and he did not see the face of his father. That's Jasher chapter 21 verses 11 through 21. So Ishmael was intermingled, and I will be getting to this point soon, because most people don't truly understand what it is that they are seeing in this world. But Ishmael, he was intermingled. He was a blend of Shem and Ham. Abraham was of Shem, Hagar was of Ham, because she was an Egyptian. Ishmael's first wife was an Egyptian as well. But because your ancestry passes down through the father, Ishmael was still a Shemite. The Bible doesn't speak of Ishmael's descendants, but other historians note that he married an Egyptian woman and had 12 sons. These 12 sons became 12 tribes and inhabited the region from the Euphrates to the Red Sea and the Arabian Peninsula. And so the people in this land are known as the children of Ishmael, which is why the Muslims do not reject the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. It is because they know their ancestry comes from Abraham. Now here's the thing, there are many darker skinned people in these regions, but if you never visited these places and you only see what is shown on television, you may want to believe that they are all lighter skinned people. Most Americans will tell you that they know Jesus wasn't white, but he definitely wasn't black either. This is what many in the mainstream say. They say he was what they call olive-skinned, and looks like what we know as the people in the Middle East today. You see, what is left out of this equation is the intermingling. You have to understand history. You see, at the time of world conquest, as the Greeks and Romans conquered the known world, there was an extreme amount of intermingling. The tribes of Japheth intermingled with the tribes of Ham and Shem everywhere they traveled and or conquered. This intermingling made the people in Assyria, Babylon, Persia, India, and parts of Arabia much lighter in complexion. The color of the people in this region ranged from a darker brown to yellow. The Greek and Roman invasions made these people in the Middle East lighter. And that is what is shown on television, news, and entertainment. They don't often show the darker complexions of the people in the Middle East, like these people in Yemen.
Distinguished by their dark skin, they are the untouchables of Yemen. They are known as the Akhdam, an Arabic name for servants. They prefer to be called the marginalized ones, a caste languishing at Yemen's lowest social order.
The thing I'm trying to explain is that this is not what the Middle East always looked like. When Greek Hellenized the world with their Greek culture, there was a lot of intermingling between tribes. So Japhites and Hamites and Semites were often being mixed together. This is easily understood when analyzing the Egyptians. The Egyptian Empire was a second world empire, and it's not very hard to understand that the people there were darker skinned people. The thing about black skin is that our melanin literally allows us to absorb the sun, which made our skins compatible with the climates in the Middle East and Northern Africa. Now, after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and established his major city Alexandria in Egypt and became a pharaoh in Egypt, it's very easy to see how the Greeks cohabitated with the Egyptians. This happened in many places all over the conquered world. There are not many pure bloodlines of people today. The only bloodlines that are really kept pure are the satanic Illuminati bloodlines, which I will not discuss. The point that I am making is that there is no need for racism because today most of us are mixed with many different tribes and nations of people. This is one thing that the slave masters made sure they did when we were slaves, which is why we have a lot of light-skinned people today. It should be noted that the Israelites had the culture of not intermingling though. They are the only people who had laws against this intermingling, but they broke them too, and I'll get to that. We obviously have dominant traits that have been passed down, but we're all mixed with a lot of different tribes today, is what I'm trying to say. It is important to understand the mind control that was done in order to get people to view the world in this way. When you go back and look at the movies of the 80s and the 90s, you can see how they consciously were programming us to look at the people of the Middle East. Movies like Indiana Jones only casted the lighter-skinned Arab peoples. Then there were movies like True Lies and others that made us begin to look at Muslims as terrorists. And they made sure they showed us one type of people. And this was intentional. It makes us feel that this is what everyone in the Middle East looks like. So when I hear someone say that Jesus wasn't white, but he definitely wasn't black either, he just looks like someone from the Middle East, for me, understanding, it's easy to see that this person is under the mind-controlling program that implanted this way of thinking. The way the modern people in the Middle East look today is due to intermingling. It is not based upon just a historic way that they have always looked. They are intermingled. For a modern example of this, let me give you something tangible. Let's look at the NBA today. What we see today is a different league than when the time of Jordan and Kobe. Many of the players today are children of former NBA players that intermingled with European women, or vice versa, like with Paolo Banchero from the Orlando Magic. By looking at him at first, I thought he was Hispanic or something else. But his mama is a Negro woman and his dad is Italian. He is intermingled. This is what children that are intermingled look like. Look at many children of interracial marriages and families. They have different looks and different skin colors, and you can see this from just one generation. What we see in the Middle East is a product of this. People don't recognize this because it's not taught to them. But if you know the history of the world and understand the original tribes of the people in these lands, and then you know the conquerors, the history of the world makes a lot more sense. You cannot forget the intermingling of the different nations, and that's what I want to be understood. Again, this is why classifying people according to the color of their skin is very stupid. Let me keep going though. So we just dealt with Ishmael. Let's move on to Abraham's other son, Isaac. From Isaac, is where we see his son Jacob bore the 12 tribes of Israel. The other son of Isaac was Esau. This is where we get the Edomites from. Edom meaning red. The Edomites was an ancient nation south of Israel and Moab. They were opponents of the Israelites. You see, there's a lot of false teaching today that says that Esau is the white man, mainly because of his red skin, and also because of the judgment that Yahuwah has placed on Esau. But the truth is that Esau is not the white race. This is an extremely false teaching and is easily proven to be false when simple research is done, as is shown today, like I did in part 4. Now, Esau is known for their lawlessness, and they were interminglers. That was a part of them. They went into everyone. And they did intermingle with the Khazars after they put them into Judaism, which is why Edom is a problem to this day. But most people don't understand that history. The Hebrew Israelites that hate the so-called white man and call them Esau, they are speaking through views of hate and lack of knowledge. They don't actually really know who Esau is. Most of them, at least. They should be avoided and not entertained, because though they have some things correct, if you happen to be one that has very little information about all this and you come across them, they might intimidate you because they obviously know more. But their understandings don't stand up to real research. So be clear, Esau is not the white man, but they definitely are mixed in and intermingled with the Khazars, who are now what we know as modern day Jews. So the Israelites, they do know the problem. They just went too general in identifying it, and instead of going by tribes of people, they did the same exact thing our oppressors did and identify people by their skin color, which is the same ignorance, and I do not condone it, nor do I support it. So don't ever tie me to the Hebrew Israelites you may have heard on the corners or in the camps. Let me make that clear. The same way I don't want to be tied to Protestant Christianity is the same way I don't want to be tied to them. Either way, the descendants of Shem were also what we know as black. And again, this includes the Israelites. As I explained in part 3, Abraham was a Hebrew. The Hebrew language is an African language. It is ridiculous to believe that those with an African language look European. It is also ridiculous to not understand that Yah equipped his people to live in these areas, like I spoke before about melanin. Do you know what one of the biggest diseases in modern Israel is today? Yeah, skin cancer. Why is that? It's because their bodies are not able to deal with the sun. They're not equipped for that environment.
Israeli researchers say early detection of the most dangerous form of skin cancer is proving to be beneficial. Officials attribute a recent decrease in the number of new cases of melanoma in Israel to their ongoing sun safety campaign. Still, the Jewish state has one of the highest rates of skin cancer in the world.
We have immigrant population that came from the former Russia. They have light skin, and they love the sun because they didn't have it. So some of them, when they came, we have to re-educate them. They were coming to the emergency room with burns because, you know, they were like giving themselves completely to the sun without any protection. And we have a lot of others who came, you know, in the 20s and 30s and 50s. They came from the western part of Europe or other parts with a lot of Ashkenazi, with light skin. So we have, like in Australia, in New Zealand, a high proportion of population who are in high risk. And it's a very warm area.
As I explained earlier, in the body of a person that we call black, they contain something called melanin, and our melanin absorbs the sun. I don't ever need sunscreen to protect my body from the sun. I need the sun. We don't need sunscreen. If you ever actually look at sunscreen through ultraviolet light, you can see that the sunscreen is just a replication of our melanin. Either way, what I'm trying to explain is that our Creator understands what we need. He did not create us in a way that our bodies would not be able to deal with the climate that we were living in. So if you believe that he did not create his chosen people to be able to deal with the sun, you are not thinking clearly. But past this understanding, just go to the scriptures. After Joseph was sold into Egypt as a slave, we find in the 42nd chapter of Genesis that he became viceroy of Egypt. Joseph's 10 brothers came into Egypt to buy corn because of the famine. All newcomers who came into Egypt had to buy corn from Joseph. But when Joseph's 10 brothers came to Africa, they did not recognize him. Please remember, Egyptians are sons of Ham. They were darker skinned people. If the Israelites looked how the world wants us to believe they look today, they would have seen the very stark contrast and difference between Joseph and the Egyptians. We know the Egyptians were dark-skinned people. This is not debated, even though Hollywood still likes to portray them as white, like they did in Gods of Egypt or that Christian Bale movie. Anyway, if they were a different skin complexion than the Egyptians, Israel should have been easy to spot out amongst the Egyptians, especially amongst his own brothers. But that is not what the scripture shows. Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Genesis chapter 42, verses 6 through 8. Then they went to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man who was master of the land spoke roughly to us and took us for spies of the country." Genesis chapter 42, verses 29 through 30. They didn't recognize him. That's my point. I went over leprosy in part 4 with Moses' skin turning white. In the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 9, it says, "I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, and its wheel a burning fire." There was a part of this description that always gets overlooked, for the most obvious reasons. When describing the Messiah's hair, he says his head was like pure wool. Have you seen wool? This is wool. This is a characteristic of the people that we call black today. They let us call it nappy, because if we were to recognize it like wool, we would start raising too many questions. Just look at it yourself.
Every year the sheep grows a fleece, and the wool on the fleece, it could be 2 to 3 inches or even more long. And so the farmer has to take off that wool, and this wool essentially comes off rather like this. What we would say is the raw fibre, the raw greasy wool. And that's carried out in a process which we normally call shearing.
This is wool. This is our hair. You see, when being objective, there is more than enough evidence to prove that all the original Israelites were of what we call darker skin, including the surrounding nations in the Middle East. We must consider the evidence that the Dravidians were the original black people of India, and they were dark-skinned people.
Many descendants of India's first civilizers, particularly those of Dravidian heritage, currently face marginalization and are relegated to lower societal roles within the Hindu system, both socially and economically. Their crucial role in founding the Indus Valley civilization is often overlooked or outright denied by some Hindu extremists and revisionists who dispute the historical impact of the Aryan invasion on India's social, political, and religious structures. This denial extends to claims that contemporary India shares an unbroken continuity with its ancient past, negating the Dravidian people's significant cultural and societal contributions. Such narratives are part of a broader pattern.
The Cushites, who we know as Ethiopians, they inhabited southern Mesopotamian Valley. They were darker-skinned people. Abraham and Ishmael both married African women. The Canaanites belong to an African family of nations, and the Hebrew dialect is directly tied to the Canaanite language. Ancient Israel intermarried with these black Canaanite tribes going against their Torah. At the time Joseph was viceroy of Egypt, his brothers could not distinguish him from the black Egyptians because Joseph was dark-skinned as well. The feet of our Messiah is described as bronze. This is a lot of evidence to just gloss over, and the fact is that we don't have images of the Israelites because the Torah forbade them to do so. We are completely deceived by a doctrine about skin color. The fact is that the world was classified by skin color after the period of the Renaissance took hold in the world. The period of the Renaissance is when humanism took hold in the world and the European artists began to depict themselves into biblical imagery. They started making their religious art adaptable to themselves. It had nothing to do with true history. I mean, they knew the truth. The Yahudim were in their countries. They were being persecuted already through the Crusades. It was during the Renaissance when the Spanish Inquisition was happening, when Portugal sent the Yahudim to Africa, and when the transatlantic slave trade started. This was all during the Renaissance. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. What I'm saying is that they knew the truth. You should understand that they were not about the truth. They were about making God adaptable to themselves. So just like they could make a pagan temple into a Christian church, they had no problem with making the people of the Bible into figures that were more relatable to them. And this is what the major part of the humanist movement was. They began to recreate visual truths of the Bible, and this was not by accident either. This was very much a conspiracy, but I do not want to go too fast through this. We just need to understand that they changed history through their paintbrush. During this period, Rome and Florence became inundated with religious art. These painters, along with many more during this Renaissance period, were hired to decorate Rome with religious art. And they did this on overload. They created a religious doctrine that spoke volumes without ever saying a word. It was a carefully carried out conspiracy that also went along with other agendas against the true Yahudim in Europe. These agendas carried out against them by the Medicis and the Borgias. You see, in order to tell a grand lie, they tore down any resemblance to history, they reimagined it and revisualized it in one way only, and then removed the people that the Bible they promoted was about. The events in Europe are well documented. This is the Renaissance period, a time where the foundation of the lies we are controlled by today began to be told. That is just the beginning of the story. It's important that you understand the humanist movement and how they reconstructed history and put a new visual identity to it. This is all historic fact. And so after the Renaissance indoctrination was complete, the next era, which was the period of enlightenment, this is when the world began to be classified not by tribe of people, but by skin color. And from this, who we are was no longer about a tribe of people, but about our skin color. This culture is based upon the culture and influence from their father, the devil. As Yahusha said, you are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. John chapter 8, verse 44. When understanding the classification of this world, for the most part, there is not a lot of debate when dealing with the skin color of the children of Ham and dealing with the children of Japheth. The problem does come in, though, with Shem, because this is where the great religious doctrines of the world are established. What I want you to understand in regards to Shem is only one people, and that is who the Bible is about, the Israelites. In regards to Shem, they are the main focus, and that is primarily because of the controversy and confusion that surrounds them. I want you to know about them, but I also want you to understand that they were darker-skinned people, and I give you a great deal of evidence why. Anyone that wants to challenge it must be as thorough. In objection to these things, you will find that the major part of people's objections, they use King David because he was described as being ruddy. People use 1 Samuel chapter 16. So he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy, with bright eyes and good looking. And Yahuwah said, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. That's 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 12. And they will say, no way that the Israelites were black because they described King David as being ruddy. Which, if you understand the definition, ruddy is defined as reddish. And so because of this, they desire to base the skin color of all Israel based on King David. But this goes back to white supremacy, because people that only look at us as black don't recognize that we come in all different colors and complexions. They don't recognize we have different tints. I have a reddish amber tint. My son has a more yellow tint. We have different complexions. When I see ruddy, I see it completely different than what these people are trying to say, because I don't define people by their skin color. But either way, there is a great deal of evidence that we know that the descendants of Shem are darker skinned people. And by that understanding, it really changes the way you see the world, which is why the mainstream has done all they can to make us not be able to see these biblical figures in this way. People wonder why the series The Chosen was made and allowed to be so popular, even though it's a series about the Messiah that the world hates. It's because it is about pushing the depiction the way the world is ready to receive it. Before these extremely recent times, They depicted the Messiah as a white man. They depicted Moses and the Israelites as white men. I mean, if you just do a Google search on any biblical character, you will see them depicted as white men. But now that we are moving in these last days, and that deception is not accepted, they depicted him as a Middle Eastern man, which is more aligned with the programming of today, while it still keeps people blinded from the truth. The descendants of Shem are darker-skinned people. And in the next part of this, I will explain why this is even important to clarify. The goal of these last 3 parts is to break down how the world was classified before it was divided by race. Now that you know about the history, the next question is why? Why was this all done? Why were we forced to be looked at only by a skin color? I mean, even if they took us as slaves, why was it necessary to strip us from our identity and heritage? If we came from nothing and we are nothing, what was the point of stripping away our identity? And that is the next point that we will deal with in this series. What I have done through these last 5 videos is giving you a historical background of the problem. Remember, the problem is that we are not black people. In order to understand that, we had to first understand when the classification of people by the color of their skin started. If it was an ancient way of viewing the world, then it would be something we would have to deal with and accept. But it is not. Race and skin color is a modern invention. So after that, we had to go back and understand how the world was really divided. And we used the unlikely source that most people reject, but it gives us the most clarity, ironically, and that is the Bible. We went through the most basic division of this world, through the sons of Noah. And we have identified that if this world was dealing in the truth, then the tribes of Israel would have had to be classified as black too when they created racism. But not only did they make sure that everything we see about Israel is people with white skin, from our images, from the cartoons, the movies, and like I just said, even more recently, they tried to get tricky with The Chosen and show us Middle Eastern people mix more the Japheth than Ham. All the imagery was made to show us one thing. And so while they aggressively worked hard to tell us that we are only black people and we have no history, we also see that when it comes to the Bible, they aggressively try to make us believe that everything that has to do with these biblical people who are the Israelites had to do with white people or those who intermingled with them. What this is called is indoctrination. And what you need to ask yourself is, why? Why did this occur and what was the purpose? I assure you there are real reasons, and this video series is a last effort to open the eyes of many who are being called to understand this. So we will stop the discussion at this time and pick it back up in the next episode where we get to the answer of why. For many of you, you are the dry bones, and it is time that you are awakened. And this series is going to do just that. So now that you understand more about one of the main classifications in this world, through understanding the descendants of Ham, Japheth, and now Shem, please continue on to the next part and allow me to explain to you who you actually are and why it was kept from you. I hope by at least this part, it has got you thinking. Right now, many of you are the dry bones, and as Ezekiel 37 verse 11 says, you may believe your hope is lost, and you yourselves are cut off. But I am here to show you the complete opposite is true. Your hope is not lost, and you yourselves are not cut off, if you just awaken and be who you truly are. So I will show you. Click the link to the next video, and let's talk some more. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share this with your family and your friends. Please remember, this is not just a video to share, but to watch together with your family and your friends. It is intended to start conversations that many of you all can lead personally. So please use this and help your family and friends that allow you to. This is part 5 of this series. Click this link or just move on to the next video in the playlist. As always, I want to thank all who donate and contribute to this ministry. Please know this series would not be possible without your support. I thank you sincerely. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. See you in part 6. I love you all.